Welcome to Success Redefined with Dr. Tony Warner. I'm Dr. Tony, mom of five, psychotherapist, author, and mentor. Here, you're going to find insightful discussions spanning science, psychology, and soul as the personal and professional meet, and we explore the intersection of what really matters. So success can be redefined with connection, healing, and fulfillment in mind. Today's episode is going to focus in on the overarching theme of society and social citizenship. I'm joined today by Chenai Kadungure to have a really hard but really important personal and professional conversation that explores what it can be like to be a successful member of society through the lens of diversity and inclusion as leaders, as professionals, as human beings, and so much more. We're going to talk about the challenges, some perspective shifts, and the benefits that this work can do for us as individuals, but also for our society as a whole, in our systems that we work in and day out. Chennai is especially positioned to have this conversation with me today, so I'm glad that we got to have it. Chennai is an executive director in public health. She's certified in diversity practice and international development. She's a passionate professional with experience building vital relationships and leading impactful programs and projects. She's even been voted one of Canada's top 100 Black women to watch. She's a Globant Inspiring Leader nominee and an RBC and Global News Hometown Hero. She's a motivational public speaker and keynote. You'll see in this conversation we had today that Chennai really pours herself into what she does. She's a proud Rotarian and president of the Global Partners in Peace and believes in service above self, which, if you stick around to the end of our conversation today, I do bring up and ask her a question about. Let's go ahead and join the conversation. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here with us today. I have a guest today who I'll say I've been in some reflection about this conversation before it has happened, because I'm wanting to be very intentional about this discussion. And I still want it to be free flowing. I still want it to go where it goes, right? Take us wherever we need to go. But I think that the topic is one that challenges us individually and socially, and we need to talk about it. And that's around diversity, specifically around diversity, equity, inclusion. But we're going to be pulling all of that in together today with how do we be advocates of diversity, leaders in the realm of diversity during challenging times, while we're also trying to be mothers and fathers, be, aunts and uncles, be X, Y, or Z, like all these other things that we're trying to be. And that then juxtapositioned with the state of our world and where things are at within our world. And so it can feel heavy, it can feel confusing, and it can feel very activating for so many of us. So, Chennai, thank you for being here and for being willing to dive in to this topic with us today.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
This is Chennai and I's first time getting to talk face to virtual face. We exchanged some emails when she went through the vetting process that all of my guests go through in order to come on the podcast. And she shared some perspectives that I think are both less common to hear people sharing, and also can just be really confusing for people to be able to wrap their heads around, and yet they're poignant and they're important. And so I wanted to have you, Chennai, come on the podcast and help us to navigate how we be successful in this world that is innately diverse, and yet we struggle with the diversity of it. And so I think that this is going to be a really good conversation. I hope that it challenges all of us and those that are tuning in because I think there's some growth that comes through a challenge. But before we hop all the way in there, can you share a little bit about where you're from and a little bit about yourself, maybe some of your background and what you do?
Yes. So my full name is Chenai Kadungure. That is a Shona name. I am originally Zimbabwean, which is, Zimbabwe is just above South Africa, if you've heard about it. Lots of other controversies around where I'm originally from. But a large part of that is why I actually do this work, because I'm no stranger to liberation, to trying to see people be free and fully being themselves. That's why I have a passion for this. I'm also a Rotarian. I believe in service above self, and also positive peace. So these are the things that have led me to take the path I've done career wise. I've always worked in nonprofits around education, entrepreneurship, and now healthcare, all on the backdrop of leading change, leading transformation, essentially. So for me, the equity lens existed long before we had a language for equity.
Mm, wow. How long have you been in the diversity and public health arena?
Diversity itself, I mean, I that was my first master's as far back as 2009. So that's been what I've basically been working around, because initially I used to do, sort of like odd volunteering and things like that with people who had special needs, and I still kept trying to figure out, like, where is my place in the world. So I would say that the cry of my heart is that every person on the earth is empowered and equipped to live their optimum life. I do not think many of us live our best possible life, and so for me, I want to be able to help people do that. So my different roles have kind of looked into that.
Hmm. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Would you say that your professional career, your professional journey into the arena of diversity and being an advocate and leader in that area has mostly gone smoothly, or have there been some some bumpy
Ooh,
road?
there have been many, many dark nights of the soul. This is not easy work. If you hear anyone say they work in any kind of diversity, if they say it's easy or fun, they're not doing true diversity work. Um, it is hard. And trying to help people navigate something they don't understand, because that's what I think a lot in diversity work is about. People just don't really understand, especially in certain communities where cultures are more homogenous, right? And you're trying to now deal with the change, right? You're actually dealing with the usual change management problems. Throw some extra emotion, throw some extra emotion, irrationality, and then also throw like the history of what people are taught to believe about other people, right? So there's a lot of unlearning. That's the icky hard part, I would say. When I my early diversity studies, even, I was definitely in over my head. Like, they would ask what seemed like simple questions, and the more you're answering those, the more you realize, wow, I've been programmed to believe in certain things, but I never actually questioned why I do. Yeah.
Hmm. Does it you said something very interesting to me in the beginning of this these statements that you're just sharing, that it's hard, and that if it's, what did you say, easy or fun, and they're not doing the work. So is it, does it ever, or has it ever felt also easy or fun, or are you saying it's like just always hard?
No, it's definite. Even in the fun, what you're doing and the outcome, the
Mhm.
output of what you're doing is going to be hard for other people, right? Because sometimes we do try, if you think about, there's like levels of creating awareness. And so you're not gonna just jump in on like PhD level for someone, right? You're gonna have to like start at the beginning to get a sense of like just how tender is the flesh around this topic. But there are definitely lots of fun ways of doing it. I've seen a lot of people do that, and I think on a corporate side as well, that's been one of the um, uh, drawbacks and challenges of it sometimes, because we're trying to make it as fun and light as possible, so we might not get the results we actually want, because what is the heart of the work if not creating belonging, right? So
Mm. So there can be the element of the fun and the excitement and even some ease, but
mm,
we don't want to lose sight of the depth, right? Like we don't want that to take priority over the depth of the work, and that can be the hard because we have to go deep. Is that a
mm,
fair
mm.
synopsis?
Yes. And think of a simple example. I mean, I've heard of organizations where it's like, okay, we want to care about diversity more, so we're going to go like eat at a taco restaurant or something, and it's like, I'm sure you've had that meal, but is the is the is the Spanish person or Mexican person or whatever in the team feeling that's what was required for them to feel belonging? It's that's where I think it's like there are layers to it, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we want to get an idea then here of some of the challenge around like how we are often thought we should be as parents, as leaders, as Black leaders, right? So as minority leaders and as white leaders of how to navigate this diversity thing
Mm.
versus the ways that are actually more, that are healthier, that are more productive, efficient,
Mm.
right? Uh,
Mm.
and I want to kind of get a gauge on the difference between the two. So in your experience, because you've been doing this work for a while now, like what would you say people think they are supposed to do to successfully fight the good fight, so to speak, right? Like successfully advocate for diversity, or maybe if it's easier to start with what you thought, right? In retrospect, like what you thought you had to do, right? To fight this good fight. And what comes to mind for me, I'll just insert it real quickly to see if it stems anything for you, was many years ago during one of my bouts of burnout, I felt like I need to be a great everything, right? And one of those things is a social worker. I'm a clinical social worker. I'm a psychotherapist. And so part of that is advocacy work. It's at the heart and soul of social work. And when one of the elections was going on, a very divisive, very challenging election, a lot of this diversity, race, all of these issues were coming up. I wanted to do what was right. I wanted to say what was right, but it felt like no matter what I did and no matter what I said, it was just not going to fit because someone was going to get upset and someone was not going to agree. And I just like, it contributed significantly to my burnout to the point where I had to exit social media for a while. But I was like, it was I thought I was doing the right thing, or I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to be a successful advocate, a successful minority woman. I was trying to be successful in that arena, and it broke me down. Like it applied way too much pressure to the point where I was like no good to for showing up for any of that stuff because I was so stressed and burnt out because of the pressure that I was putting on myself to be successful in it. It was just so backwards, so backwards. And I know I'm not alone in that, but I wanted to share a piece of that, see if that brings anything up for you as well around like, what was that for you in the beginning?
Mm. That's good. You said so many things that I'm like, oh my gosh, brain is bubbling. Okay, but the first is social workers. I just say soldiers get a really good rep for the work they do, but social workers, that has to be one of the most thankless jobs on the planet. So I just want to acknowledge that you are resilient just by choosing that track. And exactly like what you're saying, to me, I think that's probably even a harder advocacy because you have names for the people you're helping, right? I'm helping communities. So if one or two people are doing okay, that's an excellent day for me, right? To be like, I was able to impact one. you are literally having to influence decisions that lead to like what family someone ends up in, as an example, like what course of treatment they're gonna like. The risk is so much larger for you just from day to day. So I don't want us to get away from the fact that you're already carrying a lot in your 9 to 5, which is, let's face it, probably 9 to 9. Right. So yes, please, if you know a social worker, hug them, you know shower them with gifts. Pay them whenever you can, give them extra when you can. Like, I have so many social workers in my village. um, and I wouldn't be able to do this work without those friends. So just anyway, so back to what I was back to what I was saying. I think my early days, the that in over my head thing I was talking about, I would say, I think sometimes we think you can say one thing and tomorrow everything is different. And yet really we are in a sector where we sow seeds, and that takes a lot of patience. I don't have the patience for the sector I'm in, but I'm here because I just don't see any other way, right? So thinking of in the long term, it took decades for, well, I guess hundreds of years for us to be where we are now. So it's going to take as much time for us to unlearn anything if we really want to, right? Just the acknowledgement piece is hard. I mean, how many times have you had to have sessions and you're like, we're not yet at acknowledgement. Like, we're gonna have to have like follow-up session and follow. Like, you can't even start the work until there's an agreement that there's a need for the work. And so for me, when I was studying it, I realized that, oh, to do this is a lonely path. It's to feel enlightened, but the double-edged sword is you've also now got this burden of, am I really right in what I understand? And do I have a right to get other people thinking this way? There's so much doubt, so much, and so much is thrown back at you, like what you're saying about the social media and everything, that makes you feel like maybe it's better I say nothing and think nothing about these things. So even now, in 2024, I sometimes tell myself that I need to also be willing to let my convictions become curiosities, to like not let this thing become a be all and end all and become the idol of the work, because now that's the other thing that's going to sap me of energy. I'm going to give myself too much. I'm going to carry too much weight that's not mine to carry. And then I'm also going to feel like a failure over like unrealistic expectations about how this work looks. And so for me, because I believe in transformation and I have been transformed and continue to be transformed, I do believe in dialogue. I believe there's a lot of what we do in this work that is like what you're saying, just alienating without creating the space for sort of like agreement. And I tackle that even in my own family, right? Think about it. If you can be siblings raised in the same household and be so different, what more the world out there, right? What I love is, I mean, it was MLK Day recently, right? And what I love is he used to get a lot of flack for working with ex-members of the KKK, and even speaking to like I guess what was then current members, right? And working with them. But he said whatever hatred the perceived hatred for me, essentially. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here. I don't know the direct quote. Their perceived hatred for me is based on an idea of me. The only way they'll know who I am is if they get to know me. And so I think we underestimate the power of relationship. The more and more I've done this work, that's what's made the difference. Having people with influence and power say, I'll go to bat for you, I believe in you, and you can influence them, let their power spread. I think there's so much more in that than a lot of the performance of this work, because that's why I think, right now there's an unraveling, because it was performance. Like, if we care about belonging, we won't even need policies, right, to make it happen. But the reality is so far from that, which is why policies ended up being a conversation. And I was in South Africa before this, so believe me, the reckoning of um, reconciliation, transformation, like post-segregated societies, all of that. There's a lot there. Like, we expect too much in too short a time.
So much. There's so much there. I mean, we could unpack so much of what you said, right? But I wrote this down because it really, I'm going to quote this for you at some point to give you credit, right? So you said, let my convictions become curiosities. What a shift, right? From like when you enter into this work and you think, well, I need to exert is a strong word, but essentially exert my convictions to make the
Mm,
change. It feels like that onus is on you, the pressure's on you, and you better be right, right? Because
yes.
because if you're
Oh.
not, right? And that's so much pressure, but that I think that can be the definition of success for a lot of folks, especially in the realm of diversity, right? I need to be right in my conviction in order for me to speak up, speak out. Otherwise, if I'm not sure or if there's any doubt, even if I'm maybe curious, like you said, then maybe I shouldn't say
Mhm.
anything or no one will listen
Mm,
to me or what I have to say doesn't matter. For me, it was for sure I had fear that like I would just do or say something that was gonna upset someone, and I didn't wanna go down that rabbit hole because I was already in burnout, and that was just pulling me deeper in, right? But then you went on to say, if you didn't do that, it would zap your energy and then continued into the power of relationship. Like those are the three things that stuck out to me so much in what you just said is you moved from my convictions need to be right in order for me to do this work, right? Which so many people align with success. Like I need to be right and know the things and or be able to control it or figure it all out. It's all on me for this to be successful. And you shifted into no, actually, I can do really powerful, even deeper diversity work if I allow my convictions to become curiosities and lean on the power of relationship.
mm.
Does that does that
Yeah.
accurately represent what you said?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it is. And for me, it's we are in this work because of love, right? So it's like trying to say, what does love look like? I don't think there's really a wrong answer, but in the same way we can like move and ebb and say love to me today looks like this, I think our KPI looks a bit different in this work when we now think of it that way. Because for me, if just one employee in that place or one student at that school or one entrepreneur says something you unpacked onto me actually lightened my load to let me be more of myself and use less energy in performing and being myself, like that's a win. That is the success. That's so those are the small ones, but they're big ones as well, right? And the work that we do on the healthcare side, as an example, breast cancer screening in Canada used to be they used to push it for from 50 years old, but advocacy from my colleagues and allies has led to them sort of decreasing the age to 40 because we started seeing, hey, especially when it comes to Black women, breast cancer screening needs to be done earlier because they are so many times more likely to get cancer. To me, that is more direct impact, but that also didn't happen overnight. It's not like we started saying it in 2023 for it to happen in April 2024. Yay. But these are conversations upon conversations, having to do the research and data, by the way, being able to back up what you're saying. For a lot of companies, they love productivity. But if we can believe that happiness is related to productivity and we do the things that'll get employees happy, imagine if you actually care about employees and belonging. Because exactly like I said, part of your employee's battery is spent on the performance. But if you let them be themselves, you know what it's like when you're functioning in yourself, right? Like when you're not code switching as much and things like that. There's a difference to the energy that you have for the work. And so that's what I think it is. If we make the world an enabling environment for everyone else, why wouldn't you want to get on board with that?
And
Right?
that it happened, and you've said this multiple times now, and even just these short 20 minutes we've been together is it happens over time. It happens over time. It happens over time. And so often there is this pressure, I find, and I would love for you to speak to this too, of it just needing to be resulting to be immediate, right? So you're in this work, you enter the diversity arena, you want to be an advocate, you want to be a leader, you want to see change happen as a change advocate in the public health system, but it's not immediately happening. And that can be easily internalized as failure.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we see people kind of walk away from the work, or, like these are the failure drowns people. They literally feel like, okay, I just shouldn't do this work. And yet I'm like, it's a gift to want to be able to see the world be better. I firmly believe that everyone who wants to work on this side of life is trying to, especially people like social workers. Again, like I say, you are literally going into the pits of hell for strangers. Like, not many people are willing to do that. So it's hard work because it's hard work. It's not like I cut 4 pieces of paper and I have 4 squares and my day was successful. No, like, you're not in that level of power of the outputs of your day. You got out of bed, first check, first success of the day. You showered, second check. Like, we have to be able to also major on the small bits, and it's hard. I do think we're in a time where, if you think of the social media aspect, we are a highlights reel world right now.
True.
Right? So it's hard to distinguish reality and to be like, there is no one who wins every day, who wins severely every day. And so for me, that's why I always go back to any story I loved reading, any movie I loved watching. It's always going to start in the doldrums, always, without fail, right? When you look at the power of transformation in like a person's life, things have to happen. Things happen in that cave, right? Where the cave of despair, where it looks like, oh my gosh, it's over. And it's never over.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's what I think is kind of the patience aspect. Like, it's never over. Be sure you've sowed a seed, right? Even if the fruit of it is gonna come out like 20 years later, and someone is dreaming about it and they're like, oh my gosh, that conversation. So be it. But be brave enough to try and sow the seed. I honestly think you who is in the ring is doing 1,000 times more than anyone who's just decided to not do anything.
Wow. What helped you then these past 15 or so years shift, right? Make that shift from the convictions needing to be right, kind of needing to get things right and do things right to get things done for diversity, into this place where there's understanding and patience for this is going to happen over time. It's relationship building. It's not that there's one right or one wrong. Moving more honestly into the gray, which is an area of uncertainty that a lot of people struggle with because, let's face it, humans want to feel certain, especially if you're a high achiever or a leader. You're like, I want to feel certain about what I'm doing so that X, Y, or Z, right? So what was helpful for you to continue this diversity work while making that shift? You approach it, it sounds like, differently from your heart and your mind. Like you're approaching diversity work differently now than, say 15 years ago.
I mean, I think there's a lot that we do where we have to be comfortable making people uncomfortable, right, in this work. And so for me, that includes me. I have to make myself uncomfortable. And the more I looked at things like, oh, this is a trigger. This is pain speaking. This is, the more work you have to do with your own self awareness, it's like you have a grace for other people now, because you're like, I didn't arrive. I didn't just arrive overnight. It took many conversations with me. I had to unlearn things and I had to make the decision to do that. I can't make that decision for someone else, right? So there's some of that. Then there's your own wellness. You get burnt out when you're doing things in your own steam. And I believe that, and for me, I have a faith as well, right? I'm Christian. I can't. I would not be able to do this work if I was thinking it's just dependent on me. And if I fail today, everything fails. Like, I had to think there's something bigger than me, and change is certain, right? Change is certain. The only thing I can try and influence is the acceleration, but there is an inevitability, I think, to this kind of transformation, right? If we look at the way our nations are made up, just in the past 20, 30 years alone, the level of migration, global migration that's happened, people are reckoning with change that they were not ready for. Like, that's the reality, right? No, whatever is going to bring people there, doesn't really matter what the cause is, but you're going to have to speak a language you've never spoken. You're going to have to think of a reality outside your own. And I think it's the empathy bit again, right? Understanding that what's projected back at you is not actually that. Like, even when you're dealing with, let's just say, a Facebook troll, they don't even believe what they're saying. The emotion of what they're feeling is what they're saying to you. And so being able to separate that out and say, okay, we are so many unhealed people and healing is a journey for everyone, that gives you grace, right? To be like, yo, I get it. And this is where you're at today. We're going to keep talking. And I've had friends like that who started so far on like one end of the spectrum. And honestly, like a year or two of conversations later, like the things they say, and I'm like, what is happening? And so there is that. I think, and like you said, you're a parent, you know, even with parenting, right? There are results that you see only with time. And so that's what's given me that energy.
Mm. I agree that healing certainly is a journey for everyone, and we all have a healing and growth journey at any given point in time or at different places. What helped you? Because you said I have to make myself uncomfortable. You said it includes me, right? Like I'm not just in this work to make other people feel uncomfortable. I have to make
Whew.
myself uncomfortable. Not everyone can say that so confidently, right? Like in fact, a lot of people in leadership positions feel like they need to not show discomfort. And so I think it takes a level of self-confidence. You spoke to your faith, a level of faith in order to really say that and mean that. Were you just always comfortable with making yourself feel uncomfortable, or what was that journey for you? Because I think that there's a lot of richness to that. If we all get more comfortable with allowing ourselves to feel the discomfort of growth and challenge and transition and uncertainty, especially in the realm of diversity, but in many realms, then oh my gosh, like how powerful would that
Mm.
be? But the reality is that a lot of folks do not want to feel the discomfort for a variety of reasons, and so it results in different, either poor behavior, unhealthy behavior, abusive behavior, numbing behavior, avoiding behavior, X, Y, or Z. So, what is it that helped you to say and to mean, I have to make myself uncomfortable. I have to include myself in the discomfort.
I think you're not growing if you're not assessing yourself and evaluating yourself in the same way you're doing it with everyone else. And as human beings, we always, we're projecting something, right? Just because we're not aware of it doesn't mean we're not doing it. And so for me, I want to be fully aware of how um, not dealing with my own triggers or unhealed areas in my life, how that either limits the work, but also limits my relationships with other people, right? I think even in a um, romantic situation, right, there's a lot people miss out on because they choose not to be vulnerable. So for me, I see it as okay, if I have a comfortable pursuit of even my own vulnerability, I will attract the same. If I want people to be a safe space for me, I have to be that for them. How do I know that's a reality unless they tell me? Unless I am evaluating, unless I'm also reflecting and mindful about the way I do things. Even now, if you think of what we say about the language, we talk about a lot of people have headaches about the language. And I'm just like, if someone's communicated to you what they need to feel seen and heard, then you don't have to agree with it. You lose nothing from giving that to them. That's always my idea. If it's free and I can give it to you and it's going to do something for your mental health, I'll do it, right? I don't have to understand it. And that, again, I want to say convictions and curiosities. That was a journey because for the longest time, I was like, oh my gosh, why do I have to do that? And it's like, but it's not about me. I was like, this person's told me something about them. And they said, here are the ways in which you can be a safe space for me. And so it's like, oh, I have to humble myself enough to actually try. And
Mm.
so I do that. I'm not perfect at doing it. I'm still human. I am flawed. But I think there is a humility that I'm able to maintain because of doing that. And then I can look myself in the mirror. Because I think there's a certain level where if you choose not to do the work, you can't even look yourself in the mirror because you're lying to yourself as well. Right. So, what else are you going to tell other people if you're not doing the work?
Was there like a certain moment, a certain experience, or a certain time that really stands out for you where you really deeply knew and felt you needed to make a commitment to allowing yourself to explore the discomfort, to really committing to like being vulnerable, more vulnerable
Mm.
sometimes, even in spaces and places where diversity is struggling.
I think it's when you get the unsolicited feedback, right? And someone lets you know they've hurt that you've hurt them, or um, there's a policy you could have made that could have helped them, and you have to just sit and ponder and think about like what was going through my head at the time, because I think we don't ask ourselves enough exactly what you're saying, like how do people experience me? And I think that's just a basic question of leadership. If I consider myself a leader, surely I must see the fruit of what's happening with my followers, the people who I influence. Like what is that? And I've always said leaders can say whatever they want, but their fruit will always speak out loud, right? It's going to be their employees, their children, the other people around them. That's always going to really tell you, okay, that'll separate the wheat and the chaff. So for me, it's if there's something wrong with the fruit, you have to start looking. Okay, is there poison at the root somewhere? Is there, do we have a toxic lake underneath the tree? You know what I mean? Like that's the investigation, right? So, oh yeah, that's not easy.
Was there a specific time when that happened for you that it felt particularly impactful?
Whew, I don't know. I want to think of the most recent. I mean, like, I definitely have a lot of tough conversations with my sister. I think she's one of those people who is not worried about tact and things like that. And so I think we spar a lot. Um, and so definitely there's that, like someone who's known you, for all of life. So you have to always, reflect back on some of the things they say. But I would definitely say with that case where I've had someone who worked under me tell me about something I did wrong. Thankfully, it was a conversation where they could also tell me something I did right. So it wasn't entirely like painful, but receiving negative feedback is icky. But I think if we can get more comfortable hearing it, I just think that you grow so much more, right? I don't believe we should major on our weaknesses and like obsess about them, but I do think we should occasionally, look at how it impacts everything else, right? Understand how we as people impact other people.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a decision. I mean, it's and then micro decisions over and over and over and over and over and over again, right?
Yeah, because I tell myself integrity is a value, and so how do you make integrity tangible?
Yeah.
Yes, you tell the truth, but also there's an integrity to your own values. And so for me, I will know that, ooh, that day I was disingenuous. Ooh, that day my heart was not in it. If someone then tells you something that you already know, then there has to be that ownership. What does that ownership look like? And accountability is a swear word, right? That's why for me, I'm like, I don't want people to think of it as leadership is something they can exclude themselves from. Say, I'm not a leader, so I don't need to be like, no, everyone is a leader. You are
I agree.
influencing someone.
Everyone is a leader in some way.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, at the very least, you're the leader of your own life, right? I mean, at the very least.
Mm. And we know for most people, they're doing much more than that. If you have a job, again, I guess you're leading employees, everyone is a leader. So I just think if we are less afraid of doing that work, some of it is the stigma though, like
Mm.
I'm Black and African. Like this is not, um, it's not common for us to be thinking about the psychological world in that way. It's something we kind of want to avoid. And worse if there's a faith. Oh, we just pray these things away and what? No, like this is a real thing. You are writing a policy that's going to change someone's life. You're gonna have to think a bit more about this.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a challenging question. Um, okay, so let me first connect some of the dots that are happening in my head. All right.
Oh,
So you have shared that, a big part of the shift for you as you move through diversity work is really embracing patience of allowing it to happen over time, not needing to have your convictions be the right ones, but allow them to become curiosities. Faith is a part of this for you as well. Uh, Power of relationships, and you touched only very briefly on there are times when you felt like, oh, kind of in over your head, or you didn't want your energy to be zapped, right? And so, with all of that, there's this element of success and being aware of when we're sacrificing ourselves in pursuit of
yeah.
success that's actually not going to leave us feeling fulfilled. Right?
Mhm.
And then there
Mm.
is this redefined pathway that we can move towards for success that actually allows us to prioritize ourself, our health, our relationships, while also, caring for the service towards others.
Mm.
So those are the dots that I'm connecting in my head as I ask you this challenging question.
Okay.
Right. So you shared that you are very deeply rooted in the service above self. And I would like to take a few moments to unpack service above self and how do we put that in the context of serving successfully without sacrificing self chronically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even in this very important work that is oftentimes hard and and in my belief is really a calling. People are called to do this kind of work, right? Of
Mm.
diversity and equity and things like that. How, because service above self can easily turn into a sense of martyrdom, a sense that you should neglect yourself or you should put yourself last. And then it leads, we know, to more burnout and harder conversations and all of these things. So, very long-winded, but and challenging question, but it's one that I have it on my heart and my mind. I have
Yeah.
to ask you.
Oh yes. Absolutely. Um, and so I'll even go back and say, okay, a small biblical story that I think captures this well. There's a point where Elijah is being chased by everybody, and everybody wants to kill him, and everyone's angry at him. And he asks the Lord, like, "Ah, I just don't want to do this work anymore." He's in the cave, in the dark cave we're talking about, right? And he's like, "Oh my gosh, like they just want to kill me." He's having like a whole wine session, like, "Oh, this is terrible." God's response, he gives him some food and tells him to go to sleep. And literally that's it. Like he has to wake up and do the work again tomorrow. I think service above self should not mean like not loving ourselves. If I have a right understanding of what to love myself is, well, so two stories. With the first time I got burnt out, because obviously, I mean, burnt out several times. The first time I got burnt out, the doctor says to me, tell me, a bit about what your week looks like." And I describe it to him. First, he's like writing, and then there's a point where he just stops writing and he just looks at me with this like almost like judgy eye, and I was like, "Oh dear." And he's like, Chennai, the soul wants to do 5,000 things. Chennai, the body can only do 500. You're going to have to learn to negotiate. And I want you to see your body like a spouse. And you have to say, I want to do these things, but can we do it? Have the conversation because your body is giving you signals all the time that you are like, you're pushing it and we don't listen. right? And so, and we part of why we don't listen is what you said. The work is important. If I don't do this, what happens? You know what? If you miss a week of work, the world will not end. But if you fall off the face of the earth because of your burnout, it might. It just might. And so part of loving the work is also loving yourself. And so for me, I would say that the boundaries with that, and even a burnout therapist once said to me actually that, like, yeah, that's it's what it is. Like she reframed the question and said, what lie have you been telling yourself that has led you to believe that you need to earn love?
Mm.
And I was like, what does this have to do? Earning love? Da, da, da. She's like, yeah, like it's literally that thing that something in you feels you need to earn love. And yet, if there's a day where you do nothing, you're just as lovable.
Mm.
You're just as competent, just as edgy. All these things you're worried about that you feel you need to prove by working, doing all these 50 things. And I had to let go of it. And I was like, wow, we sometimes can be in bondage to certain ideas and not realize it until, again, like I say, your body's like drawing off alarm bells to be like, are you kidding me? We haven't slept in 3 days. Like, we should know that's a non-negotiable. And I will still say this, that there are people in toxic workplaces where they feel they can't make these decisions. And if anything, that is a crossroads. If you're listening to this and you're at a crossroads and you don't know if you belong there, I'm telling Carolyn Wanga talks about it all the time. Like sometimes you just have to change the environment. I've been in a toxic job and I'm telling you, the way when you're in a normal job, when you're in a normal job, it feels like heaven. You're just like, this is what life is like. You don't have to like feel this dread and misery. And so much of illness is just our body telling us something is wrong. And so it could be a different kind of something is wrong, but I definitely think that it's a really going back to that. I should love myself enough. That'll help me do the work. But even if it's not about the work, like
Mm.
I should care about. Yeah.
I've come to view the word selfish on a spectrum where because everyone uses it's like, oh, selfish is such a bad word. You should be selfless. But when you're selfless, there's no one to take care of yourself, which is not good. Yeah, and not
Mm,
healthy, right? So I view it on a spectrum where there's this healthy selfishness and then there's toxic unhealthy selfishness, right? And the healthy selfishness embraces some of what you've said, right? So taking care of yourself and noticing your needs, having those boundaries, all of those things, those healthy, selfish things actually help you to serve better, serve deeper, serve more sustainably. However, that's different than the far other opposite end of the selfishness spectrum, which is the
mhm,
toxic selfishness. And that's it's a separation selfishness,
mhm,
right? Where it's like, you versus me or us versus them or it's all mine and there's not enough for you. It's a
mhm,
divisive, it is diminutive, it is very much so a separation, whereas the healthy selfishness is a it allows for a deeper connection. And I think if we view selfishness in that way, then we can put service above self on that spectrum and move it towards that healthy selfishness spectrum and say, service above self doesn't mean don't take care of yourself, right? Embrace
mhm.
the service to yourself without going on the far other end of the selfishness that becomes toxic.
And part of it is ended up being cultured, by the way, right?
Mm,
Because
mm, so
there are
true.
very few, in in our culture, look, like what's expected of women versus what's expected of men is worlds apart, right? Like from birth, you're kind of being raised to be a perfect wife. That whole wake up at 5 a.m., do all these different things. Like you are conditioned to think of being a good person as being just carrying everyone else. Like you're not actually taught how to care about yourself. So I think it's even sometimes not just the boundary, but that learning I was talking about, oh, there's actually like no one's gonna teach me how to care about me. I have to actually be able to like listen to my body and do all these other things because that message is so much louder. The message that celebrates your busyness and oh my gosh, you've done this thing for 50 different people, that's louder. So I think that's the earning love bit as well, right? Whereas, for my brothers, I think it's like, oh, okay, this person has a job and like is not entirely useless. They're amazing.
Mm. So then, Shania, we as we pull this together, I want to ask you one last question.
Mm.
And that's as you reflect on this conversation that we had together today, but also just as you've reflected on your life and your journey, how would you say you would redefine success for yourself in your life now? Like, what is your newly redefined definition of success for you in your life? As a woman, as minority, as diversity advocate, in whatever realm fits for you. But what would be your redefined definition of success for Shania?
Just to go with an oxymoron, I think it's hoping for a time when Black excellence um, is celebrated less than just Black mediocrity, being able to just be a person. Um, because I think there's so much labor in excellence. There's so much labor in that having to work so hard. It's kind of like a earning your, I don't know, earning your right to be seen kind of language. I think we put too much pressure, too much pressure
Mhm.
on on the workplace over that expectation. So for me, success would be that. And actually, a lot of the research is showing that people resonate with authenticity a lot more than anything else. So even our ideas of success now as a world are shifting. And so I would like to get on board with that. That's the kind of stuff that'll allow me to rest in peace. Yeah.
Less of the focus on the experience being pressured or needing to prove, and more of the focus on just the acceptance and the belonging, that connection of just being.
That's true freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Thank you so much.
One day.
Well, and it's that we're moving in that direction, like you said, right? It's happening over time, incrementally, little bit by little bit, where maybe can't just see the immediate reaction from it or outcome of it, but we are, if we slow down enough, able to feel it more and more and more. When it,
Mm.
if all that pressure improving is taking the front seat, how do we really notice the subtleties? How do we really feel the depth of that experience? It makes it so much harder.
But I think communities like this are important, right? Because I think if someone is in their hamster wheel season, a conversation like this, I hope, would like to give just a bit of that freedom to be like, you know what, like today I am switching off the phone and just taking a me day. Like I remember one of the greatest jobs I had, we had something called a me, myself, and I day. And so the company gives you about $250 and you just go do something like this. Time it has nothing to do with your leave or anything like that. It's basically like a mental health day or whatever. And you just do whatever your hobby is, whatever gives you life, you do that. And so I think it's if we can find ways to make it easy for people to relax in that way. I think we're doing well.
I love that idea. I think that's amazing. Um, Shania, thank you so much for being with us here today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. And thank you for the work that you do, honestly, because this is, yeah, it felt like a therapy session for me too.
Well, I've loved this conversation, and I love that we could tie so much into this diversity, equity, inclusion conversation in a way that I think, yes, can feel a bit much, but also I think can help us bring it home too. Help us bring it home to what is within our control, what we can do something about, which is where we're really going to be able to make more of the influence, more of the impact anyway. So we want to bring it back in. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in with us today. We are so glad that you've chosen to spend this time and space with us. If you're on YouTube, check out the comment section, leave your questions, your reflections, contributions, all that good stuff. We will always want to continue to cultivate this community so we can connect with one another in a meaningful way. And until next time, I hope you go out. I hope you experience meaningful success in whatever form that looks like for you, and that it ripples out to make positive impact on others around you. Bye, everyone. Links related to this episode can be found in the show notes section. Want to submit questions about success, satisfaction, healing, and relationships, health, or work? You can do that free and anonymous at drtonywarner.com, where you'll find other resources there as well. Did you benefit from this episode? You can subscribe, like, and share with another to pass it on because anyone can listen on the go with this podcast audio available on all major podcasting platforms.